Hi, my name's Kara-Leah, and I wanted to give you a concrete example of what I talked about on my last video, looking at how judgment functions and how, as we are taking political, social and economic action, we need to be aware of where we're acting from. Are we coming from a place of judgment, in essence through the mind, or are we coming from the ground of being, or just perception? Last week I went for a walk on the beach and I met a man on the beach who was a friend of a friend's, and as we were standing there just, having idle chit-chat as you do when you get introduced to somebody, we were both looking down and he commented on the amount of plastic just at our feet. And this is on Waiheke Island. And I remember walking on these kind of beaches even 5 years ago, and you would not see the volume of plastic, like really tiny little bits, that you do now. Like it's just incredible. Like it breaks my heart to see. And we got talking, and it turned out that this gentleman, Grant Hall, he was involved in a company called the Good Water Company. And the Good Water Company started when he was working in nightclubs, actually, and there wasn't a lot of beer being drunk. There was a lot more water. And he and his friends decided that if they were selling water, they might as well sell their own branded water, and so he got into the water business. However, then he discovered how plastic bottles are recycled, or rather how they're not recycled in New Zealand, and he was gutted because, of course, here he was thinking that it was okay to sell bottled water because it was, the bottles were all being recycled, it was all good. And then he found out that, in essence, they're not really recycled in New Zealand. All plastic bottles are pretty much, bailed up and sold off to the highest bidder, and sometimes they're just burned. They're shipped off to China and burned. So he decided that he was going to do something about it. He was already selling this branded water. He got together with some other people. I want to keep the story short, but basically what happened was he got together with some other people and managed to source technology that enabled them to create a square, compostable plastic bottle. All right? Now this technology is nothing new. It's been around for a while. It's getting hot out here in the sun. And so he had this bottle, and they started using it for all their water bottles. But because they were selling such a low volume of bottles, their bottles, which could be commercially composted, were still being put in with all the other plastic bottles and shipped off to China. So he's like, right, I need to get enough of my bottles into the waste stream so that it's worth separating them out so that then we can actually recycle them, properly recycle them within New Zealand. So this was his big scheme. And to do that, it meant that he had to get on board some of the biggest producers of bottled water in New Zealand, which of course is Coca Cola, right? Because I think there's fructose in Coca Cola. And the reason is that this particular technology, I think it's called PLA, it's great for water and juice, but because of the way the plastic works, it's not the best choice for carbonated drinks as of yet. So there he is. He's basically in head office of Coca Cola in Auckland. He has this bottle which can be composted commercially within about 45 to 90 days, so you're not getting all of this plastic bottles going into the landfill or getting shipped back to China and burn, or getting downgraded, like the way that they recycle, they downgrade things, or basically showing up on the beaches in New Zealand. So it's a huge breakthrough in terms of being smarter in our packaging system. And he's telling me this story as we're walking along the beach at Waiheke, looking at all the plastic on the ground. These are tiny, tiny bits. Like we were picking up the bigger stuff. And he's there, and the Coca-Cola execs, they're saying how much they're committed to sustainability and they want to make a difference and all of that, and et cetera, et cetera. But what it came down to in the end is that if Coca-Cola has said, yes, we're going to take on board this compostable bottle and we will start using it for all of our water and juice, it would have cost them an extra 2 to 3 cents per bottle. And that would probably reduce their bottom line by about $3 million a year. And so they said no. And I'm listening to the story and I'm thinking, wow, that's just fascinating, right? Because I'd never heard of this. I didn't even know that we had the technology to create a plastic bottle that is biodegradable. Like, it has to be commercially biodegradable. You can't take that plastic bottle and put it in your backyard and have it biodegrade. But it's still possible, right? And it's definitely an improvement on the plastic bottles that we're using right now. I didn't even know it was possible. And finding out that it's possible is like, oh my God, we can be doing this. So then I'm asking, but why not? And when you reflect on that story, you imagine those, a lot of people go, oh my God, Coca Cola, they're just so bad, they're just so wrong, how could they do that? They don't care about the world at all, blah, blah, blah. And there's judgments that come out, right? Judging the execs, judging Coca Cola for not making those decisions. However, is that useful, right? Is that judgment useful? Because what is more interesting to do, I think, is to accept that situation as it is, because it's in the past, right? It has already happened, and we can't change that. When you accept a situation, right, and you're not looking at it through the filters of your mind, you're not looking at it through beliefs and ideas and thoughts and assumptions and judgment, then you can look at that situation as it is, and you can ask yourself questions. And this is the essence of yoga, self-inquiry. So when I look at this situation, this is how I approach it. And I get really curious. I'm like, okay, so why did Coca-Cola not want to take on the bottles? And Grant, who told me the story, he said it was because of the bottom line. He said it was because it would cost 2 or 3 cents extra per bottle. So let's take that at face value, because maybe there were other factors as well, but let's just accept that that was the number one reason. Okay, so that means that the decisions that the Coca-Cola executives are primarily making come down to money. It's not rocket science. I mean, this is how business generally works, right? Is that when you're, and I know this too, like when you're making a decision, you're generally looking at how is this going to impact the bottom line. The thing about publicly traded companies is that those execs, it's not like they are independent of a system, right? They may even on a personal level have wanted to back the bottle. They may have wanted to use the bottle, but they're not working independently, so they're accountable to their shareholders and to the board and to the people above them. So they're part of a collective, they're part of a system. And if you were in their position, okay, if you were that Coca-Cola executive and you saw the world that they do and you believed what they do and you had the same constraints that they do and you're in the same system that they're in, you would make the same decision, right? That's the guts of it, because you are them and they are you. So it's no use judging them. It's better to seek to understand, okay? Out of understanding, once you start to understand where they're coming from, what's constraining them, why they're making that choice, from that ground of understanding, then you can say, okay, so what can we change within this complex system? Are there any little pieces that we could move? Because if we move this little piece over here, then that might move that, which might move that, and then all of a sudden, that exec may be able to make a different decision, you see? And that's the space that I'm interested in. No judgment, total acceptance of what is, however, seeking to understand on multiple levels what is giving rise to the choices that we're making today. One thing that would radically change the decisions that companies are making when it comes to things like packaging is right now we externalize all the costs of production, not all the costs, but we externalize the environmental cost of production. Now what that means is when Coca-Cola creates a product and they put it inside packaging, they're only paying to produce that packaging. They're not paying for the life cycle of the packaging, so they're not paying the environmental cost of that packaging. Once it leaves the factory, it goes out into the wholesalers, then it goes to the retailers, and then it goes to the consumers, and ultimately it is the consumer who is bearing the cost of the packaging. The consumer is us, right? And we all make up society, and it's society that is bearing the cost of the packaging. What would happen if we internalize the cost of packaging? I mean, and this is nothing new. This is not rocket science either. This would simply mean that if a company like Coca-Cola has a product, like a bottle, water, bottled water, and it's selling it, then it has to account for and pay for the cost, the life cycle of the packaging, okay? So that means that, say, there's many ways to do this. I don't want to get into the ins and outs. But what it means is when the bottle leaves their premises and goes all the way to the consumer, the end user, they're still paying for what it costs to recycle that product or collect that product or put that product in landfill, whatever it costs. the manufacturer has to pay for it. What will happen then is that a compostable, biodegradable bottle becomes in effect cheaper than a plastic one. So then the Coca Cola exec in that office is making a much easier decision, because all of a sudden it makes economic sense to go with the product that decomposes. Okay? So a couple of takeaways from this. When we're looking at a situation, we're like, why are they making that decision? How can they make that decision? Why are they fracking this or digging for that or doing that? Looking at it from a perspective of judgment is not useful. It's not useful. It doesn't kind of get us anywhere, right? And it perpetrates the myth of separation, that us and them and good and bad. Instead, it is far more useful to get really curious and inquire deeply into that situation and seek to understand it on multiple levels. When you seek to understand the situation on multiple levels, asking why, then unexpected solutions or different ways of operating may arise that allow us to, by changing something over here might change. I think that's a big takeaway. Curiosity instead of judgment. Oh, that's really interesting. Why is that happening? And is there a different way that we could do it? Alrighty, that's all I'm going to do, because I'm over my 10 minutes. So I'm Kara-Leah, and I'm exploring different ways in which we can be both waking up and affecting real change in the world.